Lightning split the midnight sky, turning the ruined stable into a cathedral of shadows and rain. Lady Seraphina Voss stood inches from Lord Cale Thornwood, soaked auburn hair clinging to her face, rose silk plastered transparently against her skin, hazel eyes fierce with defiance. Water streamed from his dark hair. His open shirt revealed the glint of a broken silver pendant at his throat. Gray eyes that had long been winter steel now burned with torment and barely leashed hunger. They had fled here after the final confrontation. Truths unearthed, betrayals named, blood nearly spilled. Now, with the storm raging beyond the open doorway, everything narrowed to this single moment. "You told me to leave," she whispered, voice trembling yet unyielding. "Then why does the only truth I know stand right here, destroying us both?" "Because you were never the wrong Carriage," he rasped. "You were my reckoning." Lightning flared, and their mouths crashed together in desperate, rain-soaked surrender. If the storm of hearts has seized you, subscribe now. The tempests that forged this kiss will shatter everything. The grand assembly rooms of Eldridge gleamed like a jewel box under the blaze of 1,000 candles, their flames dancing in gilded mirrors that multiplied the splendor infinitely. Swirls of silk and satin swept across the polished parquet as couples twirled in precise quadrilles, the air thick with the scent of beeswax, hothouse roses, and the subtle rivalry of expensive perfumes. Laughter tinkled like crystal, yet beneath it lurked the sharper notes of ambition and appraisal. This was the marriage mart, after all, where fortunes were weighed as carefully as hearts. Lady Seraphina Voss stood near the refreshment table, her dance card limp in gloved fingers, feeling every bit the outsider despite her father's vast shipping empire. At 24, with 3 seasons behind her, she was no longer the fresh debutante who inspired sonnets, merely the wealthy merchant's daughter, clever tongue and unconventional opinions intact. Her auburn hair was pinned in elegant coils, framing a face more striking than classically beautiful. High cheekbones, expressive hazel eyes that missed nothing, and a mouth prone to skeptical curves rather than simpering smiles. Lord Harlan Graves, Viscount of Blackmere, droned on beside her, his voice a monotonous sermon on estate management. "A firm hand is required, Miss Voss. My late wife, God rest her, was far too indulgent with the servants. Standards must be maintained." His eyes, small and calculating, flicked to her décolletage before returning to her face with proprietary satisfaction. Seraphina forced a nod, stomach twisting. Harlan was titled, solvent and persistent, precisely the match her mother urged. Yet his words painted a future of suffocation. Children disciplined into obedience, opinions silenced, passions reduced to embroidery and household ledgers. Love, partnership, mere frivolities for novels, not life. The heat pressed in, candles flickering like judgmental eyes. Whispers followed her. The Voss girl, too particular, too outspoken, destined for spinsterhood despite her dowry. Excusing herself with a murmur about needing air, Seraphina slipped through the throng toward the terrace doors, ignoring her mother's sharp glance from across the room. Outside, the night air was a balm cool, scented with damp earth after an earlier shower. But the terrace teemed with couples seeking similar escape, chaperones hovering like hawks. Seraphina descended the stone steps into the gardens, past fountains and arbors where stolen kisses hid behind fans. She walked until the music faded to a distant hum, until she stood alone at the carriage yard's edge, breathing deeply. She would not cry. She was no simpering heroine. Yet the weight of expectation crushed her. Be biddable, be beautiful in the approved way, be grateful for any offer. Her father's fortune opened doors, but branded her forever trade. Never quite acceptable in this glittering world. A carriage rattled into the yard, horses snorting steam into the chill. Seraphina pressed against the wall as a tall figure emerged, broad-shouldered, moving with innate authority. Even in lantern light, she recognized him. Lord Cale Thornwood, the reclusive Earl of Ravencrest, whispered of in drawing rooms as the Ice Earl. He had stood apart all evening, gray eyes surveying the crowd with detached disdain, deterring even the boldest debutantes. He spoke briefly to his coachman, then climbed back inside. The carriage remained stationary. Hiding, Seraphina realized with a jolt of kinship. The untouchable Earl fleeing the ton's scrutiny, just as she fled Harlan's grasp. Voices carried from the house, her mother's sharp call, "Seraphina? Where has that girl gone?" Panic surged. Discovery here, alone in darkness, would fuel scandal. Her family's carriage waited somewhere in the line, dark lacquer, perhaps with silver trim. In the dim light, one shape seemed to match. She gathered her skirts and ran, wrenching open the door, tumbling inside with a gasp. Velvet cushions enveloped her. She slammed the door shut, heart hammering. "Good evening," came a cool, amused voice from the shadows. Seraphina froze. A match flared, illuminating sharp features. High cheekbones, storm-gray eyes, dark hair slightly disheveled. Cale Thornwood regarded her with raised brows, a small lantern now casting golden light across the interior. "Wrong carriage," she breathed. He reached past her, close enough for her to catch sandalwood and rain, and locked the door with a decisive click. "Right one, actually." The carriage lurched forward, plunging them into the rainy night. Seraphina gripped the seat as cobblestones blurred past fogged windows. "Stop this at once. This is abduction." "Is it?" His tone mild, almost bored. "I was peacefully awaiting departure when an uninvited guest invaded. If anyone suffers assault, it is I. I mistook. It was dark. You must halt." "Impossible. I have escaped the evening's tedium and have no intention of returning." He stretched long legs, posture relaxed arrogance. "Your reputation will endure a brief ride. My patience would not survive another waltz." Outrage flared, mingling with reluctant amusement. "You are insufferable." "So I am told." His lips twitched, nearly a smile. "By persons far more exalted than a merchant's daughter." Heat flooded her cheeks. Yet beneath his cold veneer, she sensed weariness, a man armored against the world. As rain pattered on the roof and the city gave way to darker streets, an unexpected question escaped her. "Why were you hiding?" His gaze sharpened. "Observant, aren't you?" A pause. "We all wear masks, Miss Voss, some heavier than others." The carriage rocked on, carrying them toward unknown destinations, and perhaps unforeseen beginnings. What would you have done in Seraphina's place? Demand release or seize the adventure? Comment below your choice. The carriage rolled steadily through the rain-drenched streets of Eldridge, the rhythmic clatter of hooves and the hiss of wheels on wet cobblestones the only sounds piercing the heavy silence within. Droplets raced one another down the window panes, distorting the flickering gas lamps outside into smears of gold and amber. Inside, the small hanging lantern cast a warm, intimate glow that seemed to shrink the world to the space between the two velvet benches. Seraphina sat stiffly, hands clasped in her lap, acutely aware of how thoroughly soaked she was. Her rose silk gown clung coldly to her skin, the delicate fabric rendered nearly transparent in places. Stray auburn curls had escaped their pins and lay in damp ropes against her neck and shoulders. She could feel the chill seeping into her bones, yet it was nothing compared to the cool, assessing gaze of the man opposite her. Lord Cale Thornwood reclined with the ease of someone utterly at home in solitude. His long legs were stretched out, boots polished despite the weather, and his white shirt, open at the throat, revealed the strong column of his neck and the glint of a silver pendant resting against tan skin. Dark hair, slightly disheveled from the rain, fell across his forehead in a way that softened the severe lines of his face. Those gray eyes, sharp and unreadable, studied her not with outrage or lechery, but with a weary curiosity, as though she were an unexpected puzzle dropped into his evening. Minutes passed in unbroken quiet. Seraphina's pulse, still racing from her flight through the gardens, began to slow, only to quicken again under the weight of that silent scrutiny. Why did he not rage? Why did he not demand the coachman turn back at once? The Ice Earl was meant to be untouchable, glacial. Yet here he sat, calm as winter frost. At last she could bear the silence no longer. "I truly did not mean to impose," she said, lifting her chin even as her voice emerged steadier than she felt. The ballroom became unbearable. Lord Harlan Graves had cornered me with intentions I found intolerable. The confession surprised her. She had not meant to reveal so much to a stranger. Yet something in his quiet presence invited honesty, or perhaps exhaustion had simply loosened her tongue. A faint flicker crossed Cale's features. Recognition, perhaps, or reluctant sympathy. "Graves," he repeated, the name laced with dry disdain. "The Viscount whose ambition outweighs both his charm and his conscience. A wise retreat, then. Men of his stamp collect wives the way they collect hunting trophies, to display, not to cherish." The observation struck home with uncomfortable precision. Seraphina had spent years watching suitors weigh her father's shipping fortune against her outspoken nature, her love of books and star charts, her refusal to simper or flatter. They wanted the Voss heiress, compliant and ornamental. They did not want Seraphina herself. "And you?" she asked, emboldened by the darkness and the strange intimacy of their circumstances. "You climbed into your own carriage only to sit in the dark rather than return to the ball. What intolerable intention do you flee, my lord?" His fingers stilled on the pendant, an old family crest, split cleanly down the middle as though cleaved by a blade. For a moment the mask slipped, and she glimpsed raw weariness beneath the aristocratic reserve. "Expectation," he said at last, voice low. "The endless performance of civility among people who smile while sharpening knives. I have played the part long enough to know its emptiness." 10 years earlier, his betrothed, Lady Isolde Haverford, had fled with his younger brother Rowan on the eve of their wedding. The carriage in which they sought to reach Scotland had overturned in a storm. Both were killed instantly. Society whispered that Cale's coldness had driven her away. He had never contradicted the tale. Guilt and grief had forged an armor of isolation around him. The earldom managed with ruthless efficiency, tenants cared for, reforms enacted. Yet no one permitted close enough to wound him again. Seraphina leaned forward slightly, drawn despite herself. "Yet you came tonight. If the masquerade exhausts you, why endure it at all?" A pause. Then, softer, "Obligation. And perhaps a remnant of curiosity about a world I once believed held more than hollow ritual." The carriage lurched over uneven ground, throwing her forward. Her gloved hand brushed his knee before she caught herself. Heat flared in her cheeks, but he did not flinch, only drew a slow breath, as though the brief contact had cost him composure. Outside, the rain softened to a gentle patter. Conversation turned cautiously to safer ground. Her secret readings of Mary Wollstonecraft and astronomical treatises borrowed from her father's library. His quiet pride in the school he had built for estate children, far from London's notice. Each revelation felt like a stone removed from a carefully constructed wall. Yet beneath the tentative words lay unspoken fears, hers of perpetual misunderstanding, his of the devastation trust could bring. The carriage slowed before an imposing townhouse, its windows dark save for the lamp over the entrance. "Ravencrest House," Cale said quietly. "We have arrived." Seraphina's heart stuttered. "You cannot mean to take me inside, alone at this hour." "Only briefly," he assured her, rising to offer his hand. "My great-aunt, Lady Margaret, lives 3 streets away. She will provide chaperone and conveyance home. We will say you took ill at the ball and required quiet. No breath of scandal need touch you." His fingers were warm, steady as he helped her descend. For a heartbeat they stood close on the wet pavement, rain misting around them, and something passed between their gazes. curiosity, challenge, the first faint spark of recognition. As the great door opened to admit them, Seraphina realized that one impulsive flight had altered her course irrevocably. And perhaps, in the shadows of Ravencrest House, his as well. Would you have accepted Cale's solution, trusting a near stranger to protect your reputation, or demanded to be taken home at once? Share your thoughts below. Morning light filtered through the heavy brocade curtains of the Voss drawing room, casting pale gold across the Persian rugs and the polished mahogany furniture that spoke of new money carefully curated to imitate old. Seraphina had barely slept. The events of the previous night replayed in relentless fragments. The stifling heat of the ballroom, Harlan's cloying proposal, her desperate flight, and, most vivid of all, the quiet intensity of Lord Cale Thornwood's gray eyes in the lantern-lit carriage. She had returned home just before dawn, escorted by Cale's great-aunt Lady Margaret, a formidable widow whose sharp wit and impeccable lineage had smoothed over any whisper of impropriety. A carefully crafted tale of sudden faintness and the kindness of an old family acquaintance had satisfied her mother, for now. But Seraphina knew the reprieve was temporary. A sharp rap at the front door echoed through the house, followed by the butler's measured footsteps. Moments later, her mother swept into the morning room where Seraphina sat pretending to read the society pages. "Lord Harlan Graves is here," Mrs. Voss announced, eyes bright with triumph and warning. "He wishes to speak with you privately. This is the moment we have waited for, Seraphina. Do not squander it with your stubborn notions." Seraphina's stomach nodded. She set aside the newspaper, smoothing her simple morning gown of sprigged muslin. "I have no wish to encourage him, Mamma." Mrs. Voss's lips thinned. "You are 24. Your father's fortune will not keep you forever. Harlan offers title, position, security. Refuse him again, and you risk becoming a burden." The word landed like a slap. Seraphina rose, spine straight. "I will speak with him." In the formal parlor, Harlan waited like a general surveying conquered territory. He was impeccably dressed in dove-gray superfine, his cravat a masterpiece of starch and folds, but his small eyes held the glint of a man accustomed to possession. "Miss Voss," he began without preamble, bowing with stiff correctness. "Your abrupt departure last evening caused me concern. I trust you are recovered." "Quite recovered, thank you." Seraphina kept her voice cool, hands folded demurely despite the urge to clench them. "Good. Then we may proceed." He stepped closer, the scent of his pomade cloying. "I have spoken with your mother. My intentions are honorable and generous. You will want for nothing as Viscountess Blackmere. Gowns from Paris, a house in town, the respect due my station. In return, I require a wife who understands duty and discretion." The speech was rehearsed, delivered with the confidence of a man who had never been refused. Seraphina felt the walls closing in again, the same suffocation she had fled the night before. "My lord," she began, "I am sensible of the honor." She never finished. The butler appeared at the door, expression carefully neutral. "Lord Cale Thornwood, my lady. He insists the matter is urgent." Harlan's face darkened. "Thornwood? What business has that recluse here?" Cale entered without waiting for permission, his presence filling the room like a sudden drop in temperature. He wore a dark blue coat that accentuated the breadth of his shoulders, his hair still slightly wind-tousled from the ride. Those gray eyes swept the scene. Harlan's proprietary stance, Seraphina's rigid posture, and something dangerous flickered in their depths. "Forgive the intrusion," Cale said, voice smooth as polished steel. "Miss Voss promised me her company this morning. A prior engagement, you understand." Harlan drew himself up. "Engagement? With you? The man who has not danced a single set in a decade." His laugh was ugly. "Society still whispers of your tragic little scandal, Thornwood. The lady who chose your brother over you, and paid for it with her life. Do you truly believe yourself fit company for an unmarried woman of reputation? The barb struck true. Cale's jaw tightened, the pendant at his throat catching the light like a warning. Seraphina saw the flicker of old pain before the mask slammed down. My fitness is not your concern, Cale replied, each word precise. Miss Voss's wishes, however, are. Both men turned to her. Harlan's gaze demanded submission. Cale's held a silent question and an offer of escape. In that heartbeat, Seraphina understood. Cale had come not from obligation, but from the fragile connection forged in the carriage. Two souls recoiling from the same gilded cage. He was extending a lifeline, risky and improper, but real. She stepped forward, placing her hand lightly on Cale's offered arm. Lord Thornwood is correct. I did promise him my company. Lord Harlan, I regret any misunderstanding, but I must decline your suit. Harlan's face flushed crimson. You choose the Ice Earl over a viscountcy? A man branded by tragedy and scandal. I choose myself, Seraphina said quietly, the words steady despite her racing heart. Harlan stormed out, muttering threats of social consequences. The door slammed behind him like a gunshot. Silence fell. Seraphina became acutely aware of the warmth of Cale's arm beneath her fingers, the subtle tension in his frame. You did not have to intervene, she said at last, releasing him though her hand tingled from the contact. I disagree. His voice was low. Some chains are too heavy to break alone. They left the house together under the pretext of a walk in the nearby arboretum. Spring sunshine filtered through new leaves, birdsong a bright counterpoint to the storm still echoing in her chest. As they strolled beneath arches of blooming hawthorn, conversation flowed with surprising ease. He spoke of his Highland estate, remote, wild, a place where duty felt meaningful rather than performative. She confessed her dreams of sailing beyond England's shores, of mapping stars unseen by London's smoke. Near a secluded fountain he paused. Harlan will not relent easily. He is accustomed to having what he wants. Then let him learn disappointment, Seraphina replied, meeting his gaze. As I intend to live for what I want. Something shifted in Cale's expression. Admiration, perhaps, laced with caution. And what is that, Miss Voss? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. She felt the spark again, brighter now in daylight. Truth, she said finally. Connection. Someone who sees me. Not the fortune, not the facade. His fingers brushed hers beside the fountain's rim. Deliberate this time. Dangerous wishes. Perhaps, she acknowledged, not withdrawing. But I have never been fond of safety. Thunder rumbled distantly, though the sky remained clear. A promise or a warning? As they walked on, hands no longer touching but awareness thrumming between them, Seraphina knew the die was cast. Harlan would retaliate. Society would whisper. And Cale Thornwood, guarded, wounded, unexpectedly honorable, had just declared himself her ally. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. What would you have done in Seraphina's place? Accept Cale's risky alliance, or handle Harlan alone to protect your reputation? Share your choice below. The weeks that followed Harlan's humiliating rejection unfolded like a delicate game of strategy played on shifting ground. Eldridge's tongue buzzed with whispers. The Voss heiress had spurned a viscount for the company of the Ice Earl. Some called it scandalous folly, others romantic defiance. Seraphina cared little for the chatter. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Her days were consumed with her father's ledgers, tracking shipments from the Indies, deciphering coded warnings of rival interference. Harlan's hand was evident. Delayed cargoes, whispered doubts among investors. Yet evenings brought clandestine reprieve. Quiet meetings with Cale in shadowed bookshops or the secluded corners of his library at Ravencrest House. The library became their sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling shelves groaned under centuries of volumes. Philosophy, poetry, treatises on agriculture and astronomy. A fire always crackled in the grate, casting flickering gold across worn Persian rugs and the massive oak desk strewn with estate maps. Cale moved through the space with quiet authority, pouring brandy or tea with the same precise grace he applied to everything. One such evening, rain lashing the tall windows, he spread documents before her. "Harlan's reach is longer than I anticipated," he said, voice low. "These are copies of manifests, your ships rerouted under false pretenses. He has allies in the smuggling rings that plague the northern coasts." Serafina traced the forged signatures, anger sharpening her focus. "He seeks to ruin us to force compliance. If the Voss fleet falters, Father's creditors will circle." Cale's hand covered hers briefly, steadying. "We will not allow it." The touch lingered, sending warmth spiraling through her despite the chill beyond the glass. Obstacles multiplied. A formal ball hosted by the Duchess of Ashford forced their public reappearance. The grand ballroom blazed with chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and speculation. Serafina wore emerald silk that deepened the hazel of her eyes, auburn hair pinned with pearl combs. Cale, impeccable in black, stood apart until duty drew him to her side. They danced once, a waltz that felt dangerously intimate amid hundreds of watchers. His hand at her waist was firm, guiding. Her fingers rested lightly on his shoulder, feeling the controlled strength beneath. Conversation was impossible over the music, yet their eyes spoke volumes. Caution, longing, shared resolve. Harlan struck in the lull between sets. He cornered her near the refreshment alcove, smile venomous. "Still playing with fire, Miss Voss? Thornwood's frost will burn you in the end." His grip on her arm bruised. "Return to reason. Accept my protection, or watch your family's empire crumble." Cale materialized like a shadow given form. "Remove your hand, Graves." The words were quiet, lethal. Harlan released her, but his parting glare promised retribution. Later, on the terrace beneath a canopy of stars, Cale's restraint cracked. "I should have called him out. And risk scandal that would harm us both?" Serafina touched his sleeve. "We fight with cunning, not pistols." He caught her hand, thumb tracing her knuckles. "You ask much of my patience." The moment stretched, charged. Then a false lead disrupted the fragile peace. A tip about Harlan's next sabotage led them to the fog-shrouded docks at midnight. Cloaked and cautious, they evaded watchmen, hearts pounding in unison as they searched a warehouse for evidence. Inside, crates loomed like monoliths. A lantern's glow revealed nothing, until footsteps echoed. They pressed into the shadows, Cale's arm around her waist pulling her close. Breath held, bodies aligned. They waited as guards passed mere feet away. When silence returned, relief surged into something fiercer. In the dimness, Serafina turned to him. "We cannot keep dancing around this." His answer was a kiss, slow at first, exploratory, then deepening with the hunger of weeks restrained. Her back met a crate. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing rain-damp curls. The world narrowed to heat and heartbeat, the taste of brandy and urgency. They broke apart breathless. "This complicates everything," he murmured against her temple. "Good," she whispered. "I am tired of simplicity." Growth came in quiet moments, her impulsivity tempered by his strategy, his isolation breached by her persistence. Yet frustration mounted as Harlan's attacks escalated. A key ship vanished in northern waters, rumors of insolvency spreading like plague. One stormy night in the library, maps strewn like battle plans, tempers flared. "You hesitate too long," Serafina accused, pacing before the fire. "We must confront him directly." Cale's eyes darkened. "And risk open war? I have lost too much to recklessness." The words hung heavy, echoes of his past betrayal. Regret softened her anger. She crossed to him, hands framing his face. "You will not lose me." His restraint shattered. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, mouths meeting in a kiss that spoke of fear and need. Clothes fell away in hurried urgency. Firelight painted their skin as they came together on the thick rug. Passion raw and honest, a claiming and a surrender both. Afterward, tangled in his discarded coat, he traced patterns on her shoulder. Harlan grows bolder. Tomorrow he hosts a gathering. Many of your father's investors will attend. Then we attend as well, Serafina said, resolve stealing her voice, and turn the tide. But as thunder rolled overhead, neither could ignore the gathering storm. Harlan's next move would be decisive, and the fragile alliance between ice and fire would be tested as never before. Would you have confronted Harlan openly at this point, or continued gathering evidence in secret? Share your thoughts below. The challenge came at dawn, delivered by a liveried servant whose face betrayed nothing as he handed Cale the sealed parchment. A duel. Pistols at Blackmere Field. First light in 3 days. Harlan's signature sprawled boldly at the bottom, citing insult to honor and interference in private affairs. The ton would feast on it for months. The spurned Viscount defending his pride against the notorious Ice Earl. Serafina read the note over Cale's shoulder in the quiet of Ravencrest House's breakfast room, morning sun slanting through tall windows. Her blood chilled. He seeks to destroy you publicly. Cale folded the paper with deliberate calm, though his knuckles whitened. Or force your hand. If I refuse, I am branded coward. If I accept and fall, Harlan believes you will have no choice but to accept him to salvage your family. She paced, skirts whispering against the Aubusson carpet. Then we expose him before the duel. The forged manifests, the smuggling ties, present them to the magistrates. Time is against us, he countered. Harlan's influence runs deep. Evidence can vanish as easily as ships in fog. The 3 days passed in a blur of strategy and mounting dread. Serafina pored over ledgers late into the nights, searching for the thread that would unravel Harlan's web. Cale's agents scoured the docks and taverns for witnesses willing to speak. Yet each lead frayed. A clerk intimidated into silence. A captain who suddenly recalled nothing. On the eve of the duel, despair gnawed at them both. In the library, fire burned low, casting long shadows across books and maps. Serafina stood at the window, watching rain lash the glass once more. We cannot let him win, she said quietly. Cale came up behind her, arms encircling her waist, chin resting on her auburn curls. I will meet him at dawn, and I will not fall. His voice held steel, but she felt the tremor in his frame, the echo of old loss. She turned in his arms. Promise me you will come back. He kissed her then, slow and deep, as though memorizing her. I have too much to live for now. Dawn broke cold and gray over Blackmere Field, mist curling like ghosts around ancient oaks. A small crowd had gathered despite the hour, seconds, physicians, a few daring spectators drawn by scandal's allure. Harlan stood smug in tailored black, pistol case open beside him. His second, a hooded figure against the chill, kept to the shadows. Cale arrived with quiet precision, coat unbuttoned against the wind, face carved from granite. Serafina watched from a concealed rise nearby, wrapped in a dark cloak, heart hammering against her ribs. She had insisted on coming, unable to bear waiting in ignorance. The ritual began. Paces counted, pistols chosen and loaded. The men turned back to back, Harlan's smirk visible even at distance. Serafina's fingers dug into her palms. Then chaos erupted. As the seconds reached 5, Harlan's hooded companion threw back his cloak and lunged not at Cale, but toward the Viscount himself, blade flashing. Shouts rang out. Cale spun, pistol raised but unfired. The attacker's hood fell away, revealing a face Serafina had never seen yet somehow recognized from old portraits in Cale's study. Leaner, harder, scarred, but unmistakably bearing the Thornwood features. Rowan. Cale's voice cracked like breaking ice. The man, Rowan Thornwood, presumed dead for 10 years, laughed bitterly. Alive, brother. Thanks to Graves' coin and lies. He rounded on Harlan, who had gone pale. You promised me vengeance and a share of the earldom. Instead you planned to let me take the fall for your murder of Cale. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Harlan stammered denials, but Rowan pressed on, voice carrying in the still morning air. I survived the crash. Isolde did not. Graves found me half dead, nursed me in secret, fed me tales that Cale had engineered the accident out of jealousy. He forged letters in your hand, Cale. Letters that drove Isolde to flee with me, all to destabilize the Thornwood line and claim influence through marriage to the Voss fortune. Cale staggered as though struck. Seraphina's mind reeled. The betrayal not his coldness, but deliberate manipulation. Harlan's scheme stretched back a decade, rooted in greed for power. Rowan's blade hovered at Harlan's throat. I was his tool, until I learned he intended to kill you today and pin it on me. A convenient mad brother returned from the grave. Seraphina could bear no more. She stepped from concealment, cloak falling back. Enough! Her voice rang clear. From her reticule she drew the packet she had worked through the night to assemble. Copies of ledgers, sworn statements from intimidated clerks finally persuaded to speak, proof of Harlan's smuggling and forgery. Magistrates, alerted anonymously, emerged from the tree-lane with constables. Harlan's protests drowned in the clamor of arrest. Cale lowered his pistol, eyes locked on his brother, grief, fury, and reluctant relief warring across his face. Rowan dropped the blade, sinking to his knees as chains were applied. In the aftermath, as the field emptied and mist burned away under rising sun, Cale and Seraphina stood alone amid trampled grass. I believed I drove her away, he whispered, voice raw. That my reserve was poison. Seraphina took his hand. You were never the poison. You were the target. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. The walls he had built for a decade cracked wide open. Grief pouring out, but also space for something new. When he kissed her, it was different. No longer restrained, but fierce with reclaimed life. Stakes had shifted irrevocably. Harlan disgraced, his allies scattering. The Voss fortune safe. Rowan alive, complicated, wounded, but perhaps redeemable. And Cale freed from a decade of self-imposed guilt. Yet shadows remained. Society would devour the scandal. Rowan's return threatened inheritance and reputation. And Seraphina knew the deepest wound, Cale's fear of loss, would not heal in a single morning. But as they walked from the field hand in hand, sun breaking fully over the horizon, she felt the turning. From hidden alliance to open partnership, from isolation to the promise of shared tomorrows. Would you have forgiven Rowan after such a revelation, or demanded justice without mercy? Share your thoughts below. The scandal broke like a tidal wave over Eldridge, sweeping away reputations in its wake. Broadsheets and scandal rags vied for the most lurid headlines. Icy Earl's dead brother returns. Viscount unmasked in decade-long deception. Merchant's daughter entangled in Thornwood tragedy. Caricatures flooded the streets. Cale depicted as a grim reaper, Rowan as a vengeful ghost, Harlan in chains, and Seraphina, inevitably, as the scheming seductress who had ensnared them all. The Voss family felt the backlash first and hardest. Investors withdrew commitments overnight. Ships sat idle in harbor as creditors demanded immediate repayment. Whispers turned to open cuts. Invitations ceased. Former friends crossed the street to avoid greeting Mrs. Voss, and Seraphina's name became synonymous with impropriety. In the once grand Voss drawing room, now stripped of its air of confidence, Seraphina's mother wept openly over a stack of unpaid bills. You have ruined us, she accused, voice breaking. All for a man whose very name is poison. Seraphina stood silent, the words striking deeper than she cared to admit. Her father, usually her staunch defender, looked suddenly aged, his eyes weary behind his spectacles. "We will weather this," he said quietly, but doubt threaded his tone. Worst was the silence from Ravencrest House. No note, no visit. Only a brief message delivered by a servant. Lord Thornwood is indisposed and requests no callers. Isolation closed around her like a shroud. Friends who had once flocked to her wit now avoided her gaze at the few public places she dared appear. Even the park, once her refuge, felt hostile under the stares of dowagers and debutantes alike. At night, alone in her chamber, Seraphina replayed every moment. The carriage, the library, the duel field. Had she been reckless? Had her defiance invited ruin not only for herself but for everyone she loved? The pendant Cale had pressed into her hand the morning after the duel, his broken family crest, lay heavy in her palm. A farewell, perhaps. Across the city, in the shadowed halls of Ravencrest House, Cale walked a different abyss. Rowan, under house arrest pending formal charges, occupied a guarded wing, alive, yet a living accusation. Every glance at his brother reopened the wound. The crash, the guilt, the decades spent believing himself unworthy of love or trust. Servants whispered of the Earl's moods. Meals untouched, nights spent pacing the library, brandy decanters emptied. He stared at ledgers without seeing them, estate business neglected. The revelation had freed him from one lie. His coldness had not driven Isolde away, only to chain him to another. His very existence drew destruction. When news reached him of the Voss family's financial straits, self-loathing deepened. Harlan's allies, scrambling to distance themselves, shifted blame to Seraphina's association with the Thornwoods. Ships were seized under old, conveniently rediscovered debts. Creditors circled like wolves. Cale penned letter after letter to Seraphina. Apologies, explanations, pleas, only to burn them in the grate. What right had he to drag her further into his darkness? Better she hate him than be destroyed by him. The final blow came on a rain-lashed evening. An anonymous packet arrived at the Voss residence. Documents purporting to show Seraphina's complicity in Harlan's schemes, forged signatures implicating her in smuggling. Though patently false, the threat was clear. Publication would finish them. Seraphina sat alone in the dim study, packet trembling in her hands. Tears came then, hot and silent. She had fought for truth, for connection, for a life beyond gilded cages, only to lose everything. Cale's silence confirmed her deepest fear. She had been a fleeting thaw in his eternal winter, nothing more. In the deepest hour before dawn, she wandered the empty house, memories tormenting. His hand steadying hers over maps, his rare laughter in the library, the way he had looked at her after the duel, as though she were salvation. All illusion. At Ravencrest, Cale stood at the window watching the same relentless rain. Rowan's bitter words echoed. "You destroy what you touch, brother. Always have." The old guilt, briefly banished, returned tenfold. Seraphina deserved better than a man whose love brought only ruin. He drafted one final note, brief, cold. "Stay away. My shadow consumes all it falls upon. Forget me and live." But even as the wax sealed it, his hand shook. The lie tasted like ash. Seraphina, meanwhile, made her own desperate decision. If Cale would not fight for them, perhaps surrender was the only mercy left. A loveless marriage to some lesser suitor might salvage her family's remnants. The thought was bitter gall, but pride had cost too much already. In the abyss, both reached the same bleak conclusion separately. Love was the most dangerous risk of all, and they had lost the gamble. Yet in the coldest darkness, a single spark remained. The pendant in her hand, the unsent letter in his, neither quite ready to extinguish it entirely. How would you have acted in Serafina's darkest moment? Clung to hope, or chosen pragmatic surrender to save your family? Share your thoughts below. The rain had turned to sleet by the time Serafina made her decision. She stood in her darkened chamber, the forged documents scattered across her dressing table like venomous petals. Outside, wind rattled the windows as though the storm itself demanded entry. For 3 days she had waited for word from Cale, some sign that he had not surrendered them both to silence. None came. Enough. If he would not fight, she would. Not for pride, not even for love, but for the truth they had uncovered together and the future it deserved. She dressed swiftly in a dark wool riding habit, practical for travel and concealment. The pendant, Cale's broken crest, went into her pocket, heavy as a talisman. A note left for her parents spoke of visiting a distant cousin. The truth was far riskier. By hired postchaise under cover of night, she set out north, toward Ravencrest's Highland estate where Cale had retreated. The journey took 4 relentless days. Muddy roads, indifferent inns, sleet turning to snow as elevation rose. Exhaustion gnawed at her, but fury and resolve burned brighter. She replayed his final cold message, "Stay away," and refused to accept it as his true voice. Ravencrest Manor rose from the mist-shrouded moors like a Gothic sentinel. Gray stone towers, narrow windows glowing faintly against the leaden sky. Snow lay thick on the drive. The gates stood open but unguarded, as though the house itself had withdrawn from the world. A startled groom took her horse. Inside, the great hall felt tomb-like. Fires banked low, fewer servants than she remembered, portraits of Thornwood ancestors gazing down in stern judgment. The butler, recognizing her, hesitated. "His lordship sees no one, miss." "Then he will see me," Serafina said quietly, removing her snow-dusted cloak. "Tell him Miss Voss demands audience. He knows why." Minutes stretched eternally. At last, footsteps echoed on the stone stairs. Cale appeared on the landing above, unshaven, coat discarded, white shirt open at the throat. His gray eyes, hollowed by sleepless nights, widened at the sight of her. "Serafina." Her name emerged rough, almost broken. "You should not have come." She ascended the stairs without invitation, stopping 1 step below him so their eyes were level. Snow melted from her hair, dripping onto ancient oak. "And you should not have hidden. But here we both are." He turned away, leading her not to the warm library but to a cold, unused sitting room where dust sheets covered furniture like shrouds. A single fire struggled in the grate. "I asked you to stay away," he said, voice flat. "You did." She drew the pendant from her pocket, holding it out. "Yet you sent me this. A farewell or a summons?" His gaze fixed on the broken crest, pain flickering across his face. "Both. I cannot ask you to share my ruin." "Your ruin?" Anger flared, warming her more than any fire. "Harlan's lies nearly destroyed my family. Rowan's return threatens your title, and you choose exile? You choose to let the poison win." He laughed bitterly. "I have always let it win. Isolde Rowan, now you. Everyone I—" He stopped, jaw clenching. The unspoken word hung between them. Serafina stepped closer. "Say it." "No," he backed away until the wall met his shoulders. "I will not bind you to this wreckage." She followed, relentless. "You mistake me for someone who wishes to be spared. I crossed half of England in winter sleet because silence was worse than any scandal. Because the man who faced pistols at dawn for my honor does not cowered now." His control fractured. "You think I cowered? Every breath near you terrifies me. The last time I loved," his voice cracked, "they died. And now my mere existence drags your family into bankruptcy." Serafina caught his hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. Harlan's allies falter without him. Father has found new investors who value honesty over titles. The scandal will fade. Scandals always do when truth outlives them. But if you shut me out, that wound will not. He searched her face, desperate. And Rowan? His claim is complicated, yes, but he is alive because of lies, not love. You owe him compassion, perhaps, but you do not owe him your future. She pressed the pendant into his palm, closing his fingers over it. And you do not owe the past your happiness. For a long moment only the fire's sputter broke the silence. Then Cale sank into a dust-sheeted chair, head in hands. I have forgotten how to hope. Then let me remember for both of us. She knelt before him, framing his face as she had once in the library. Slowly, deliberately, she kissed him, not with passion but with steady promise. He resisted for a heartbeat, then surrendered, arms coming around her as though she were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. When they drew apart, his voice was raw. What do we do? We fight, she said simply. Together. Rowan must face truth, not vengeance. Harlan's remaining allies must be exposed. And we, she smiled, small but fierce, we refuse to let fear write our ending. Resolution kindled in his gray eyes, the ice thawing at last. He stood, pulling her up with him. Then we begin now. That night, by firelight in the restored library, they planned. Letters to loyal magistrates, evidence gathered anew, Rowan summoned for confrontation rather than exile. Servants, sensing change, brought brandy and food unasked. As dawn painted the snow-rose sky, Cale took her hand. I was wrong to send you away, and I was right to come, she replied. Outside, the storm had passed. The moors lay silent under fresh snow, waiting for footsteps to break new paths. They would walk them together. What choice would you have made in Cale's place? Continued isolation to protect Seraphina, or accepted her fierce return? Share your thoughts below. The abbey ruins crouched on the wild northern moors like the bones of some ancient beast, half swallowed by mist and heather. Snow had melted into treacherous mud. Wind whipped through broken arches, carrying the salt tang of distant sea. It was here, in this forsaken place where Rowan had hidden since his arrest, that the final reckoning would unfold. Seraphina and Cale had tracked him through a chain of loyal servants and whispered confessions. Rowan had fled house arrest, leaving a trail of threats, exposed the full extent of Harlan's decade-long conspiracy, or watched the Thornwood name burn forever. He demanded a meeting alone at the old family chapel within the ruins, the site of their ancestors' vows and burials. They arrived at dusk, horses lathered from the hard ride. The sky hung low and bruised, threatening fresh snow. Cale dismounted first, offering Seraphina his hand. Their eyes met in silent accord. No more retreat. Inside the roofless chapel, wind howled through empty windows. Rowan waited by the cracked altar, cloaked and hooded, a pistol glinting at his belt. His face, once so like Cale's, was gaunt, scarred along the jaw from the long-ago crash. 10 years of bitterness had carved him into something sharper, stranger. You came, Rowan said, voice carrying over the wind. Both of you. Foolish. Cale stepped forward, shielding Seraphina instinctively. This ends tonight, brother. No more games. Rowan laughed, the sound hollow in the stone shell. Games? You think this a game? Harlan promised me justice, revenge for Isolde's death, a share of the earldom you stole by surviving. Instead, he used me as a blade to cut you down. His hand hovered near the pistol. But I have the letters now, the real ones. Isolde's final words. Proof you drove her away with your cold heart. Seraphina's pulse thundered. She had seen those letters, forged by Harlan, planted to twist the knife deeper. But Rowan's eyes blazed with conviction. Cale's voice remained steady. Show me. Rowan tossed a packet onto the altar. Wax seals broken, pages yellowed. Cale opened it, scanning lines that accused him of indifference, of emotional cruelty. His face paled, but he did not flinch. "These are lies," Serafina said, stepping beside Cale. "Harlan's forgeries. We have the originals, Isolde's true journal, recovered from his study. She wrote of her own restlessness, her fear of duty. Never of your coldness." Rowan sneered. "Convenient. The merchant's daughter defends her lover." Cale lifted his gaze. "She defends truth. As should you." Tension coiled like a spring. Wind gusted, scattering dead leaves across the stone floor. Rowan's hand closed on the pistol. In that heartbeat, hoofbeats thundered outside. Magistrates and constables, guided by Cale's earlier anonymous missive. They had waited in the treeline, ready. Rowan spun, panic flashing. "You betrayed me again." "No," Cale said quietly. "I offered you a choice. Come willingly, tell the full truth, Harlan's manipulation from the beginning, and perhaps find mercy. Or force our hand." Rowan's face twisted grief, rage, the ruin of a decade poisoned by lies. He raised the pistol, not at the approaching law but at Cale. Serafina moved without thought. She hurled herself forward, striking Rowan's arm as the shot exploded. Powder smoke bloomed. The ball buried harmlessly in ancient stone. Constables swarmed. Rowan fought like a cornered wolf, but numbers overwhelmed him. As irons clicked around his wrists, he sagged, defiance crumbling into something rawer. Cale knelt beside his brother in the mud. "It was never your fault either," he said, voice rough. "Harlan used us both. Isolde made her choice. Let the truth free what remains of our family." Rowan met his eyes, tears cutting tracks through grime. "I hated you for living when she did not. I hated myself," Cale admitted. "But hate ends here." The magistrates took Rowan away, charges tempered by his cooperation. Full testimony would dismantle Harlan's remaining network, clearing both Thornwood and Voss names. In the sudden quiet, with wind dying and stars emerging cold and clear overhead, Cale turned to Serafina. Snow began to fall again, soft, cleansing. He dropped to one knee amid the ruins, heedless of mud soaking his coat. "Serafina Voss," he said, voice steady at last. "You crossed storms and scandals to reach me. You refused my exile, refused my fear. You taught me that love is not destruction. It is the only thing that rebuilds what has been broken." He drew the pendant from his pocket, no longer broken. During the journey north, he had it mended, the crest whole once more. "Marry me, not as refuge or defiance, but as partners. Let us forge something new from these ashes." Snowflakes caught in her auburn hair like stars. Tears froze on her lashes, but her smile blazed. "Yes," she said. "1,000 times, yes." He rose, pulling her into his arms. Their kiss tasted of gunpowder and snow, of grief finally laid to rest and joy hard-won. Around them, the ruins stood silent witness. Ancient stones that had seen vows broken and now, perhaps, one that would endure. As they rode south together under clearing skies, the moors lay white and still behind them. The storm had passed. If this climactic stand moved you, would you have offered Rowan mercy or demanded full retribution? Share your heart below. Spring arrived gently at Ravencrest Manor, as though the moors themselves wished to honor the healing taking place within the ancient stone walls. Snow melted into rushing burns. Crocuses pushed defiant purple and gold through the warming earth. The scars of winter, and of deeper wounds, began to fade under sunlight and time. Serafina and Cale wed in the small family chapel on a morning when the sky was the soft blue of a robin's egg. No grand society affair marked the day. Only those who had stood by them through the storm were invited. Serafina's parents, faces lined but glowing with quiet pride. Lady Margaret, dabbing unashamed tears. A handful of loyal tenants and servants who had never wavered. Rowan attended under guard, pale and silent, but present. a first step toward whatever reconciliation the years might allow. Serafina wore ivory silk embroidered with tiny silver stars, her auburn hair loose save for a circlet of hawthorn blossoms. Cale, in severe black relieved only by the newly mended thornwood crest at his throat, could not take his eyes from her as she walked the short aisle on her father's arm. When vows were spoken, simple, fierce, unbreakable, his voice did not waver once. Afterward, in the sunlit great hall transformed with spring flowers, toasts were raised not to titles or fortunes, but to truth and second chances. Mr. Voss clasped Cale's shoulder with genuine warmth. "You have my daughter's heart, son. Guard it well, but know she is more than capable of guarding yours in return." The Voss shipping empire, bolstered by new partners who valued integrity over pedigree, began to rise again. Harlan's network crumbled under Rowan's testimony and irrefutable evidence. The disgraced Viscount faced transportation, his name stricken from society's rolls. Whispers lingered, as they always would, but time and distance dulled their sting. Years unfolded like pages in a book neither had dared imagine writing. Their first child, a son with Cale's gray eyes and Serafina's defiant chin, was born the following spring, named Edmund for Cale's grandfather, a man known for quiet strength. 2 years later came a daughter, Isolde, no longer a ghost of grief, but a laughing, red-haired sprite who charmed the sternest retainers. More followed. Another son, then twin daughters whose arrival turned the manor into joyful chaos. Ravencrest, once a fortress of solitude, became a home alive with children's voices echoing down corridors, dogs bounding across lawns, ponies in the stables. Cale proved a devoted father, reading astronomy treatises to wide-eyed toddlers by firelight, teaching them to ride on Gentlemore ponies, kneeling to tie shoes or dry tears with the same steady hands that once managed an earldom alone. Serafina transformed the gardens with her mother-in-law's old plans as inspiration, adding beds of night-blooming flowers so she and Cale could chart stars together on clear evenings. The library remained their sanctuary, shelves now holding her navigational texts beside his poetry, children's books tucked among ancient tomes. Rowan, after years of quiet atonement, first in restrained circumstances, later as steward of a smaller family holding, became a cautious but welcome presence at family gatherings. Forgiveness came slowly, earned through actions rather than words, until one Christmas he gifted young Edmund a carved wooden ship, and Cale's embrace and thanks felt natural rather than forced. On quiet evenings, when children slept and the manor settled into peaceful hush, Serafina and Cale often walked the moors together. One such twilight, 16 years after that fateful carriage ride, they paused atop a hill overlooking the estate. The setting sun painted the sky in rose and gold. Below, lights winked on in cottage windows. Cale drew her close, arms encircling her from behind. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly, the old fear a mere whisper now. "The wrong carriage that brought you here?" Serafina turned in his arms, fingers tracing the laugh lines time had etched beside his eyes. Lines earned from joy, not sorrow. "Never," she said, smiling up at him. "It was the right one, actually, the only one." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the more wind carrying the faint scent of heather and home. Below them, Ravencrest stood warm and welcoming. Above, the first stars emerged, the same stars she had once dreamed of sailing toward alone. Now she navigated them with the man who had become her truest north. Partner, lover, father of her children, keeper of her heart, and she his. In the distance, a child's laughter drifted on the breeze. They turned toward it hand in hand, walking back down the hill toward light and life and the beautiful, imperfect future they had built from the ashes of old storms. The ice had thawed completely. In its place bloomed something enduring. Love, fierce and unafraid, that had weathered every tempest and emerged stronger. And so they lived, not perfectly but wholly, ever after. How did this ending land for you? The slow, earned happiness after so much storm, or the family built from broken pieces. Share what moved you most below.